You might have driven through Glencoe in wide-eyed wonder. I know I have. But have you ever left the main road to stroll a mountain lochan that's a tiny piece of Canada? Do you even know the Glencoe story that made it one of the most romantic, the most beautiful places in Scotland? If you're interested in the people, places and events in Scottish history, then click the subscribe button at the bottom right of the screen. In the meantime, let me tell you the story. I'm Bruce Fummey, and today I'm going to take you on a very short walk to one of the most delightful places that I know. And along the way, I'm going to tell you the unlikely story of a boy from Forres whose romantic heart changed the very landscape of this place, but whose hard work and talent changed Canada along the way. On the 6th of August 1820, a young lad was born, the second son of a family living in the High Street in Forres. His dad, having had a go as a soldier and a farmer, had settled down to life as a saddler. Now the young lad's name was Donald Smith, and he went to the local school recently set up by John Anderson, and still called Anderson's Primary to this day. When he left school, he was apprenticed to be a local solicitor with the town clerk of Forres. I know, legal pen pushing for Forres Town Council. It's every boyhood dream. So how was it that he created this? A couple of years after starting with the council, Donald made a life-changing career move. Instead of quelling ink in Forres, he was going to Canada for beaver. I mean, not just beaver. He'd be trading other things as well. His uncle had been abroad and worked for Hudson's Bay Company, and he got Donald the opportunity to become a junior clerk in that trading company. Transatlantic adventure beckoned. So in 1838, he set off to work for Hudson's Bay Company in what was then Lower Canada. Kinda Quebec-y, Newfoundland-y, Labrador-y. It was this side of Canada, and you know where I'm on about. Anyway, after 44 days at sea, he landed in Canada to start his new life of adventure, counting muskrat skins in Montreal. But the glamour didn't end there. He was sent down the St. Lawrence River to the joys of his first Canadian winter. Donald stuck into this glamorous lifestyle, and 5 years later, his boss let him look after his own bit of Labrador. No, not that sort of Labrador, which was all very well, but in 1846, his trading post burned down. Then, shortly after, came the news that back home in Scotland, his dad had died. Donald fell into a slough of despair, even offering to resign. But his boss saw his potential and refused to let him go. He offered Donald encouragement and sent him to a remote trading post in Labrador along with another apprentice, James Grant. They set off in another Canadian winter. Leaving in January, they expected to reach Glencoe Bay in March. They finally got there in July. It turns out the Canadian train service is almost as bad as the Scottish one. In the same year, an Englishman called William Lucas Hardesty arrived in Glencoe Bay as a senior trader, and with him, he brought his daughters. Now, young Donald became friendly. A particular beauty was the intelligent and witty Isabella. But it was his friend James Grant, who'd travelled with Donald, that swooped in and swept Isabella off her feet. And not long after their short engagement and then marriage, they had a son. I'm saying nothing. The baby boy was named James Hardesty Grant, after the father and the grandfather, at least for now. You see, shortly after the baby was born, Isabella Hardesty and James Grant had a somewhat acrimonious split that would have been the talk of the trading station. Young Donald Smith got on with building his business acumen and the trading business. But little by little, as Isabella sought companionship, the relationship deepened. By 1852, when Isabella's dad left Esquimalt Bay to be replaced as chief trader by none other than the young Donald Smith, Donald and Isabella were an item. Now, Isabella assured Donald that they were free to marry, since the remoteness of location and lack of a minister made their first marriage a Mickey Mouse affair. Not like her actual affair with Donald. Wah, wah. But it wasn't a cartoon so much as a fairy tale. Isabella's son took Donald's surname and grew up with her own daughter, which must have been a wee bit awkward, especially with his natural dad still working for the same company in a one-horse town in the middle of nowhere. The point is that Donald and Isabella were married. In fact, since Donald was the Justice of the Peace for the area, he performed the ceremony himself. The governor said it was all above board, and of course, nobody gossiped. But the couple renewed their marriage vows another 3 times during their lifetime, just to be sure. It was because of their last marriage in their 70s that I brought you here. But there's more to tell before that. Donald went on to greater and greater heights in business. From chief trader in the district in 1852, he was promoted as the company's chief factor in charge of the Labrador district 10 years later. 6 years after that, he was promoted to commissioner of the Montreal department. But he poked his fingers into other pies as well, going into partnership in textile manufacture. He would later go on to become governor of Hudson Bay Company, but before that, as an influential person in that company, he was brought in to deal with disturbances at Red River. Now that is a messy affair in the development of Canada, involving the Hudson Bay Company, Canadian government, Métis mixed race locals, Europeans and Americans looking to annex what essentially became Manitoba from Canada. Look, can we just let it go and accept that there were goodies and baddies, winners and losers, and in Canadian history it was massive. The fact that a saddler's son from Murrayshire was such a key part in negotiating the eventual settlement, that's the point I'm making. He was now getting into politics. He was elected to the first legislature of Manitoba. He was elected to the Canadian House of Commons. When he turned down the offer of becoming Prime Minister of Canada, he was sent to London as High Commissioner. He was raised to the title of Lord Strathcona. King Edward VII called him Uncle Donald, for God's sake. He was president of the Bank of Montreal. He helped create the Bank of Manitoba and the Manitoba Insurance Company. He was chairman of Burma Oil and the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. He co-founded the Canadian Pacific Railway. In fact, when they joined the two ends of the railway line that connected Canada as a head honcho of that Canadian Pacific Railway, it was him who drove in the ceremonial spike. Why, oh why, did he no just stay in for us? Stick with the council, son. It's a good pension. He also gave squillions of pounds to charities and educational establishments. In fact, if Andrew Carnegie had lived in Canada, they would have called him Donald Smith. Oh, sorry, now Lord Strathcona. But all of that was just building up to this. Glencoe House is now a very posh hotel, but it was built by Scottish architect Rowan Anderson on Donald Smith / Lord Strathcona's instructions. It was built as a love token to his wife Isabella to celebrate the last of their 4 marriages. Now, I know that I've banged on about the stuff that this bloke achieved, but we all know that behind every great man there's an astonished mother-in-law, and often a wife who gives him support and encouragement and selfishly takes on other roles, allowing him to achieve more than he could possibly have done himself. You didn't think I made these videos without help and support, did you? I'll be honest, I only did it to surprise my mother-in-law. Here's to you, Elma. If you look around the building, you'll see the initials of Donald and of Isabella, apparently separately to show that she was an accomplished woman in her own right. You'll see the coat of arms that Lord Strathcona took for himself, and it included a maple tree with a beaver at the foot. But it seems that Isabella was homesick for Canada, and that's why you have this. Because the young lad from Forres just wanted the love of his life to be happy. Of all the wonders of Glencoe, the hidden Lochan wasn't wrought by nature, it's man-made. The trees meticulously planted round about are Canadian conifers to remind Isabella of home. A love that took root in Labrador, that grew with Donald Smith's business empire, and Canada itself matured with age and soars with this creation, so that Isabella could be at home with a tiny little piece of Canada here in the Scottish Highlands. They died within a few short weeks of each other. Lord Strathcona left many legacies to charities amounting to over £7 million, more than 100 years ago. But between them, they left this priceless legacy that we can all enjoy. If you'd like some more tales of Glencoe, then there's one coming up on screen now. In the meantime, I'm Dochas Gubila Live. Cheerio and Rasta.